Hello everyone, welcome to Litera TV. I'm Caroline Hill, Editor-in-Chief of Legal IT Insider, and it's the last Litera TV of 2020, and I don't know whether I'm smiling more about that or because I'm joined by Sherry Capel and Alma Assay, both Litera evangelists. Hi, how are you? Hi,
Very good.
Hey, Caroline.
Hey Alma, how are you doing?
Good.
God.
And we are joined by Ava, who is the cutest thing ever.
Cutest thing ever.
She would like to thank you for inviting her on this morning.
Yes.
Yeah, we may not be able to talk any sensible anything. We're just going to be overwhelmed by cuteness.
Exactly.
It's so good to see you guys. You don't need, it's really fitting as well. It's been a real pleasure for me doing Litera TV, and it's really fitting. I'm grateful to you both for coming on for the last episode of 2020 to look at the highlights of the year, of a really incredible year, and I've really loved doing Litera TV, so I'm really grateful to you both for coming on. I'll just introduce you properly. So Sherry, I love finding out funny facts. It's become a bit of a thing. So you were with Microsystems years ago, but then you've been with Litera for many years as well. But when we wrote in 2012 about you being hired by Litera, we said that you had the coolest job title, which was Chief Conciliaria, which is Latin for trusted advisor. And I think it was my predecessor, Charles Christian, wrote about it, that he was quite he was like making a point of how cool your title was.
Well, I think it's because it was sort of derived from the fact that litera is Latin for literature and, of course, the relationship to all of the document automation. And so it was like, okay, let's give everyone Latin titles. And that was how it happened. It became certainly just a sort of consultant trusted advisor. This is really how it was framed, but I kind of thought it was pretty cool mashup. I had a great title as well at Legacy Microsystems. So when I left, I was the Chief Innovation Officer. So I always thought that was a really cool title too.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I'm going to give myself a cool title. You're evangelist, so I think the funny thing, so Alma's was founder of Allegory, which is a litigation management platform. And the funny thing for me is about the fact that you sold it to Integrian and Sarah have bought it back.
I know, it's crazy. And people, some people assume that's because I came here, but oddly enough, they are two completely independent events, just in a very weird twist of fate that we end up back at the same company.
I know, because I heard at the time when I was speaking to people that it was completely independent, and but that's what makes it even more funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was good to talk to you. We've got, so the year, it's just been the weirdest year, right? Like, I think everyone is kind of exhausted, and from a tech point of view, it's actually been an amazing year, really. I wrote a piece of editorial for the last Orange Rag of the year, and I said that I think I called it Adios, Good Riddance, and Thank You 2020, because it's really been stressful, but it's, from a tech point of view, it's been a pretty big year, hasn't it? I mean, we have to give credit for the fact that it's accelerated, it's brought in practices that really we were struggling to bring in, digitization. It's actually been positive from a tech point of view. Would you say so?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you just hear time and time again about how the adoption of technology has been accelerated in ways that it never would have happened otherwise. I mean, you look at the way that Teams has been brought into law firms and how law firms have had to get creative with how they work with one another, how they work with their clients. I think it's been fascinating. And, it's interesting to me because on the one hand, Ava has lots of opinions too. On the one hand, there's been this fire lit, and these firms worked so hard in the spring to bring on all this technology. And I thought, well, that naturally means there's going to be an acceleration in technology across the board. But there's this other side to it where I've actually heard some knowledge management people talk about the fact that there's almost technology and change fatigue. And so some of the initiatives that they were working on otherwise got pulled back. And so I think it is, I think it's really exciting in all the ways that it's accelerated technology. But I also think that there is another side to it where it's not all acceleration.
So I'm going to come on to the teams. For me is fascinating, but let's start. So I want to talk about the challenges actually, because I think that, I mean, aside from the sheer volume of stuff that they've had to do in terms of the IT department, I think there's been a lot of challenges inevitably. I mean, the change of working practices has just been off the scale. Sherry, what do you see? I mean, from speaking to people, where have you seen the biggest challenges from people talking to you? Where do you think the biggest challenges have come from a tech perspective?
I feel as if the IT folks have earned a visibility that, you know, they've long been doing all of these things, but this visibility to what they do and this connection point between how the users work and what the IT people, you know, deliver. It's like people now kind of see it, where the visibility. So I think that's one really big thing. I also think a big challenge for them has been, I think this was someone who commented on our Changing Normal show, that they used to support, say, 25 offices, right? Now they support something like 2,500 because everyone has their own home office with its own, you know, interesting approach. And I loved the other night, one of the events that we had hosted for some of our clients, you know, he mentioned that they just set about doing an interesting bit of training. They would have 15-minute segments and they would teach you all about your router and all about all about how you can manage when multiple people, i.e. your kids, are doing their homework and all their Zoom calls, and now suddenly your bandwidth is gone for your work, you know, like what to do. And I just thought that was such a brilliant thing. You know, they would never have a captive audience for this kind of stuff before. And now it just really engaged and enlightened people in ways that now they're asking for things. And that's to me, the big, you know, reward in the end.
So that's a big plus, isn't it? And I hear the same. So I did a big piece talking to CIOs, and they said that in terms of engagement and training, that that people are, whereas before it was such a struggle to get people to engage, now because their hands are forced, they don't have a choice, and they're left kind of isolated. They don't have their teams, they don't have their PA right at the door, and so they're really engaging for the first time. And like we just said, just demonstrates that. I guess you're hearing the same. Alma, have you heard the same in terms of the willingness to train and all that kind of stuff? That's been a positive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I also think that there's something to be said for people having to experience change across the board. You know, how to adapt your home life, how to adapt every bit of life, right? Like your social life. And so I think people generally this year across the board have been more open to, you know, learning new things and change, and, you know, basically just desperate for any sense of stability and normalcy, even if that means having to attend a few trainings to figure it out. That little dip that's part of the adoption curve that people never want to go through, that dip in productivity. I think, you know, this year people are like, oh, okay, it's worth it. I'll take the time. And also I think there's something to be said for the fact that people are just so overwhelmed with everything that, you know, suddenly attending a training probably seems like a little bit of a breath of fresh air versus, you know, just constantly being bombarded with all the changes in their face and having to do so much work and balance kids and everything. So I think it's been good.
I can't imagine it. I just can't imagine it. You know, my kids aren't grown. I can't imagine doing that dual kind of management. Listen, there is one thing I have to share in this context, Alma. Andrea Markstrom from Taft was on our Litera TV week about their Litera desktop implementation. And Caroline, you would love this. She told us how, okay, I want you to think about rolling out a whole new desktop at this time for the entire firm, right? They had to re-image these laptops, give them these new machines. You want to know what she did, what her team did? They had curbside service. Like it was ordering it from the store and picking it up curbside. I just thought,
wow.
Oh my God.
Your point of adaptability, I just thought that was such a great thing for them to do and to connect to, because it was a familiar thing to people, or has become that. And now they're offering this to serve up your IT services. I just thought it was so brilliant.
God, the logistics. So there's been so many. I've had so many funny conversations. So one observation from a lot of people in IT teams at law firms has been that they didn't realize how like lacking in setup people were, like people who didn't know how to connect to the system from home, people who clearly like didn't really work remotely at all. I mean, I'm sure that's a lot of the time because they work really long hours and a lot of them worked in the office, right? No disrespect. But then also people that just didn't have any setup. So the sort of actually kitting people out has been, I think, from the conversations I've had, like that people have a lot of people I've spoken to have either been agile already, or they've been delivering quite well on their business continuity plan. But the hardware and that kind of thing has been actually the biggest challenge. You know, the premises, so the physical, the tangible things have been the hardest things to handle.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of people didn't even have a desk at home or a place, to work. It's like really back to basics. And I love the example Sherry gave, because it really has been, just a reimagining of how we do everything. And it's like, once you take that step back and start to reimagine how we can do things, it's incredible to see all the ideas that have come about, a lot of which I hope will be, long lasting into the years ahead.
Yeah, 100%.
I agree. And I love it's being invited into quite literally people's living rooms and bedrooms and all of this, just to have and continue, this business relationship, this colleague relationship, I don't know, it's been so, what do you say? It's just made so many more things richer in a strange, counterintuitive way.
So do you know what's funny? So I think after the initial Zoom fatigue or Teams fatigue, whatever, I think that there's this awareness that it's better, right? That actually amongst fee earners, they're suddenly aware of how much more connected they are to their partners and to their clients, and that it's not just about surviving. They've suddenly had this realization. I think perhaps the first half of the year was a survival mode, and then the second half of the year has been about working out how to make the most of it and actually going, oh wow, this is better. Do you see that?
Yeah, and I think there's going to be a lot more flexibility in the way that people work. I think there's a realization on employers' parts that people can be as productive, if not more productive, when working remotely. And so I think that trend will absolutely continue. And I hope that this trend of feeling more connected to your colleagues continues. I think it's easy to talk about this year in terms of technology, but one of the big revelations for me, right behind the technology piece, is that I feel like colleagues are more connected. You've been invited into each other's homes. We're all sharing this collective experience, and we're right up in each other's faces, which, for better or worse, is actually a little different than being in a conference room in person. Somehow it does feel more personal.
It is more, and someone who's hiring said to me that they substituted the intimacy of being in an office together with being in someone's bedroom, and it kind of sounded a little bit wrong, to be honest with you. We didn't publish that bit.
Puppies and everyone's babies and everyone's husbands. I mean, it's really wonderful.
So you wanted to talk, actually, so there's so many things that we're going to run out of time, but anyway, so the premises piece really interests me, Alma, what you just touched on. I wonder, so I'm hearing that, very much the future is hybrid. I wonder how many people, what that will look like. I think people are still trying to work out what that looks like, because I think they want people in the office. The trainees need to be in the office to be trained. There are lots of people that, meetings where you're doing high level strategy or projects, whatever, you need to be in the office, but you don't need to be in the office to do your emails. I think that's going to be fascinating what that looks like next year.
Absolutely. I think that there have been a lot of companies that have worked remotely for years. At Allegory, we were a fully remote team, and it opened up so many opportunities to hire people from across the United States, because we weren't limited to hiring engineers in New York or Palo Alto. And so it's not necessarily a new thing across the board, but for it to come into these big companies and for them to realize that this is possible, and instead of investing so much money in office buildings, they can invest a lot less money in a couple retreats a year where you bring everyone on site and everyone gets to meet one another and in a more personal, connected way. And so, certainly the office isn't going to be gone. There are reasons to bring people back into the office, but I'm really excited to see if this does make people more flexible in where they can live, how they can work. I think it's a tremendous opportunity for diversity, to be able to hire from more areas of the country and feel like that fits your business model, and give opportunities to people who don't necessarily live in New York or live in Palo Alto or have the ability to commute into an office every day. So I hope that there are a lot of changes for the better, as a result.
And that, I don't know if you saw, Hush Blackwell did a series with us on Laterra TV, and this was the year, they talked about it forever, that they wanted to have, Alma, just for that reason, they wanted to have an office that was virtual, that didn't really have a physical place, and be able to hire talent to work with them from everywhere. And in recruiting, this was always such a trouble. Yes, you have to move to Kansas City. Yes, you have to move to, XYZ city. And, people would say, no, while I have the skills, nah, not interested. And lo and behold, what they did in July is they opened their 21st office. It's called The Link, and it is entirely virtual.
That's very
We have
cool.
an office managing partner, which the word office is a little
It's like having the little floppy disk icon in Word to mean save.
exactly right. But I think it's so brilliant. And they said that the ability to have talent and even further their diversity that they've got, as a firm already, it's just remarkable. I will tell you also that I think that anyone who was queuing up any desktop project this year of any kind could have just been a little, let's get the new version of Windows, build of Windows out. Every single one of them experienced what it means to not have an entirely web-enabled method for doing that, right? It's just been excruciating for them. And I feel like that will be such a catalyst to create the proper freeway for that to happen. And so I think, again, it's another transformation that we're going to see in the year ahead.
Yeah, agree. And so, but with I've got so many things I want to talk about. So, and I'm not going to talk about this, but just as an observation, Alma, someone that we both know with diversity of hiring and recruitment also brings with its challenges, because someone that we both know hired somebody who turned out had 2 jobs. I don't know if you know who I'm talking about.
I don't, but now I want to.
So they hired somebody, and it turned out this person had also taken on another completely remote job, as well, and thought that they could do both, which was really fun.
I do know.
And it's like, so that, I mean, there's going to be so many challenges, but so with the going back to remote working, virtual working, so security obviously is a huge challenge. Sherry, I know you wanted to talk about that. I mean, it's been in the conversations I have, it was already top of the agenda, but if it can be even more prioritized, it's more prioritized. So you've obviously been having conversations about that.
Yeah, I guess I have a picture in my head of a firm who within the last 6 weeks was hit by one of the malicious virus attacks, and ended up having to redirect their entire Office, Microsoft Office environment to M365 just to operate, because they had, so much on-premises stuff that they needed to really cordon off. And so I just think that it is going to be heightened. There's nothing about this that is getting better. It's just heightening and taking advantage of this, who are these evil people? I want to meet them in an alley, and just say, go away. It's just so frustrating. We in Illinois have been hit with fraudulent claims against unemployment insurance, and many in our company based in Illinois have been affected. And it's just, this is going to be an important first thing for everyone to focus on.
You know what's, I mean, we don't have to talk about this. I don't think we kind of, one thing that I personally worry about a little bit is that with everybody gravitating so much towards Microsoft, and there's been Teams issues, and I think this is a conversation perhaps for us to have next year, that everyone's eggs are going to be more in one basket now, and there's been a lot of issues with Teams, you know, with you know, security issues, and that's just something I think it's just sort of on top of my list to think about and to talk about next year, perhaps, in terms of what does that mean. You know, I mean, we see Microsoft as impervious, and obviously they're Microsoft, you know, and they're investing huge amounts, but there's no doubt that with more eggs in one basket, that presents more risks in terms of what happens. The other day the authentication was down. You know, it's just, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that pans out.
Yeah, instead of snow days off for kids, we're going to have Microsoft is down days off for lawyers.
Right, no pressure Microsoft, you know, hope you've got it together.
Communication systems. We're going to all be IT directors, and we'll have redundant communication systems because we won't be able to communicate through Teams for some spell. You know, it's like we're all IT directors.
But let's talk about Teams, because so for me, I mean, so this falls within the bigger KM knowledge management piece, and funnily enough, I'm doing a talk about the growth of KM, so I'm really fascinated. I'm going to be picking your brains on this for multiple reasons. But so it's been, I mean, there's just been a huge growth. I don't even know what KM really means anymore. It's just expanded. The definition has expanded. What even is KM? That's my question. But so there's so much focus on, sorry, I was going to come on to talk about Teams, but so data analytics, and then you've got the, within that same KM bracket, I suppose we could talk about Microsoft 365 and Teams. I mean, you must be, so tell me about what you're hearing in terms of, so let's start with data analytics quickly. Like, so there's obviously been an explosion of firms focusing. I think that's going to be the big trend for next year, if it's not already.
I've been hearing again and again and again from those in knowledge management and innovation within law firms, more than I've ever heard before, talk about, oh, we have this initiative to leverage our data. They really, you know, firms are finally focusing on how much data they have. And I think it's going to be a long haul because all of that data is so unstructured at the moment, but they're at least finally recognizing the value in it, and that you know, it's better to start now than never at recognizing what they have, how to gather it, what purposes they can use it for.
I completely agree. And I think that we see this not just within legal, but really everywhere. Even clients are demanding, you know, insights that are very data driven. My good friend, Ginny Van Corder, who is a LinkedIn Learning instructor, she has a course on LinkedIn Learning that is Power BI Essentials, basically. And that is one of the top 10 technical courses being taken during this time. And in fact, all that LinkedIn Learning stuff is free until the end of March. And so it's incredible to me. Everyone is exploring those uses of those tools, Power BI, Tableau, an entire data essentials, you know, playlist, basically.
100%. So I interviewed Andrew Brammer, who's head of IT and shared services at Allen & Overy, and I got their three top priorities for 2021 are, and data analytics came out, I think probably one, and he was talking about Dynamics. You're doing more with Dynamics and Power BI.
Dynamics is an interesting one because it's such a mashup between like resource management, like an ERP system, and a CRM system. And when you think about that in the context of a law firm, how amazing is that when you consider you can have almost your client, it's not even your client relationship, it's your client interactions, your client service, all of your marketing cadences and touch, you know, all that can be kind of driven from there, but it will be a little bit of a building to build, right? To align for a law firm.
I think the experience, I mean, it's just that's a really interesting thing. I think so. I hear that a lot as well. So that where there's so in the vein of sort of clients aren't going to tolerate reinventing the wheel, and the firms that really need to be aligned in terms of for any number of reasons. They need to understand what it is that they've done, and they need to be able to leverage that, and they need to be able to for sort of pricing and all, everything for every reason under the sun. They really need to start working. I think the ones that I've spoken to are really focusing on the experience side and really pulling together that information more than ever before.
Agreed.
Teams is interesting. So everyone I speak to is rolling out Teams. They're not doing it for in a lot of cases for the full like collaboration piece. They're doing telephony and they're doing chat. What are you hearing in terms of where firms are at?
I think that's right. And I think that's the initial driver, right? Like get everybody on a platform where you can have meetings in person and use the chat. But I've heard from a lot of firms of then going further and setting up specific groups for specific initiatives within the firm so people can talk about specific topics. I think Teams integrations that's going to be a big thing that comes next, because for a long time software providers were like, okay, we've got to get users into our tool because they weren't anywhere to go and meet them. But now suddenly you have all these lawyers who are in Teams, and that's an opportunity for software providers to integrate and put themselves in front of the lawyers where the lawyers are. So we've seen a few this year, and I think we're going to see a lot more Teams integrations coming up. So yeah, I agree that the initial drive has been for chat and video calls, but I do hear quite a bit about, oh, here's where we can go next with this.
Yeah.
Elma, that's called purple Skype. That's how everybody onboards Teams, is that they do the Skype and they bring it in and they just call it purple Skype. So see, it's the same. It's like the kindergarten of Teams. But the thing that I keep hearing, and I can't even remember, was it ILTA-on maybe where it first came up or a little bit later, but that Teams as the front end, like it is your DMS.
Yeah.
It's managing your DMS. So it's almost turning inside out, that integration that we built between Office and the DMS. It's now gone inside out. It's Teams into Office and Teams into document management. So it's going to be really fascinating to see how that happens, because once again, people cannot tolerate the big, heavy add-ins that weigh down their productivity tools. And I don't know, going to be interesting.
So they're worried about it turning into the Wild West. Obviously, there are a couple of vendors who are dealing with the provisioning, and I think it's going to be, I think next year people are going to me, it's a no-brainer. And, the potential of using Teams to its full potential is just huge. The co-collaboration and it's part of your Microsoft stack, and from a cost perspective, and your point about it's your DM is going to be really interesting to see where this goes, right? Like
so interesting.
Yeah, because it's part of the whole stack, and if you create a group in Teams, it creates an Outlook, and it's all sorts of things that I think is going to be so interesting to see how it develops. We've got a couple of minutes, right? So forecast for 2021. What are we going to see? What's happening next year? What do you think what are we going to be talking about next year above everything else?
I think it's going to be how we create this hybrid. I think next year firms are going to have to start making the decision of when do we bring people back into the office. I think by the end of next year, fingers crossed, it will be totally appropriate to have people in the office. But where each firm goes in terms of this hybrid of how people get to work and what are the requirements for coming into the office and how it impacts their hiring practices, whether it ties in with their diversity initiatives. To me, that's the most interesting story of 2021. Obviously, there'll be a lot of interesting stories on the pure technology side, but I'm really curious to see where things go on that technology human element.
I agree. Sherry?
And I think that the tools which foster both collaboration and workflows are going to be the technology that makes all of that, you know, enriches and sort of unleashes that even further. And so just like, it's such a great new year to be a geek.
And on that note, Sherry, you're staying on, and for once I'm on time with the finish. But then you're obviously a kid.
Caroline, thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I really
Happy
appreciate
New Year. Happy Christmas.
it. Yes, happy Christmas, everybody. Do you know what? I saved this for the end.
Nice. It's too early here, but cheers in spirit.
Yeah, it's 4 p.m. here and it's Christmas. This is the last thing of the year. Apart from I'm on with Bob Ambrosi and the editorial panel and the we do a panel at the end of the week. So watch that.
Oh, we will. Thank you so much. Have a great
Thank
day.
you. Bye, Caroline. Bye, Sherry.
Bye.
See you soon, Elma.
See you soon.